Hey, folks, good afternoon. We are in, just outside of, I guess, technically, beautiful downtown Clifford, Pennsylvania today. Nice spring day. Hopefully, a little less wind noise than last time when we were in Forest City, where the camera was blowing off its stand half the time. So, I want to talk a little bit today about primary elections, which probably doesn't sound like the most exciting topic on earth, but is actually kind of important. And, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that there's probably nobody watching this who doesn't understand what a primary election is, but bear with me. I'm going to just take a couple of minutes and I'm going to rehash a few things for the purposes of emphasis, if you will, for clarity. So we have a democratic process, and you have, say, a political party. Let's just go with the Republican Party for the sake of what we're going to be talking about today. And the Republican Party wants to run candidates against its opponents, probably primarily Democratic Party opponents, but could be whatever political parties establish themselves. So we're going to have a general election in the fall, and a Democratic candidate's going to square off against a Republican candidate for name and office, let's just say state legislature. So once upon a time, the Republican Party would probably have picked its candidates just by virtue of some kind of backroom deal, and still more than a little bit of that goes on. But these days, and for some period of time, we've had primary elections, so we all know this, right? We got to, you want to be the state rep from name a district, and you're a Republican, so you go out and you comply with all the formalities, right? You circulate petitions, you get signatures, you whatever the law requires, and you get your name on the ballot, and then you campaign. And there could be 5, 6, who knows how many other Republicans who decide, hey, I want to be the Republican candidate for this particular office. And they do the same thing. So then there's a primary election, and all the Republican voters show up, and they get an opportunity to decide who is going to be the candidate. So that's how the party picks its candidate. The Republican Party picks its candidate via a primary election process. The guy or the gal that gets the most votes is the Republican candidate in the fall. The Dems, of course, do the same thing. Again, it is possible for other political parties to establish themselves, for there to be other candidates. Okay, so again, I'm rehashing a bunch of stuff that I assume is pretty obvious to you, but the point is, the Republican Party decides who will be the Republican nominee for state representative, again, to stick with the same example, via a Republican primary process. So registered Republicans, members of the party, people who support its agenda, its platform, they pick the candidate. So that all probably seems like common sense, and it is, right? But in Harrisburg, there is now a move afoot to change that entire process. And there are a number of folks pushing this, and some of them are very prominent Republican legislators in Harrisburg. And what they want to move to is an open primary. Now, I should say up front, this is not a new idea. It's been trotted out, it's floated around Harrisburg for some time. There's some pretty strong evidence, though, now that it's really getting some traction. So it's not just a couple of crackpots in the corner have this idea. This is actually becoming something that may very well be pushed in a serious way in Harrisburg. So what the heck is an open primary? Well, in the form that it is being considered in Harrisburg, what it would involve is this. It would mean that when you have a Republican primary, and the same would apply to the Democrats, but let's just stick with the analogy, with the example we've been using. You got a Republican primary. The Republicans go to the polls to vote on who their candidate is. And independents who are not part of the party would be able to vote as well. So you're going to have the Republican Party, and that means the Republican voters, the registered Republicans of Pennsylvania, and a whole bunch of people who are not Republicans and who, in fact, may completely oppose the Republican agenda and platform. They all get to vote to choose the Republican candidate. So you could be an independent, you could oppose completely the platform of the Republican Party, and you'll be allowed to vote and participate in the process to choose the candidate for the Republicans. Now, on the face of it, that kind of, just like the current system sort of seems like common sense, this probably seems kind of insane. Like, why would people who don't share the party's values and platform, don't support its positions, why would they be part of the process to decide who the candidate is? Well, like with a lot of things, you don't have to wonder, you just have to listen to what's said, because the people that are pushing this idea now in Harrisburg are really, really explicit about why they're doing it. And what they're saying is that they need to do this to counter what they call extremism within the Republican Party. And again, you don't need to really wonder what that means, because they spell that out. This is the reason this whole thing has gotten renewed momentum, why it's been ginned up again, is because largely of Doug Mastriano's campaign for governor. The folks that look at this say, you know, here's a guy who did not have the support of the establishment, who was outside the mainstream, in their terms, mainstream in air quotes, and yet he got the nomination. He was an extremist. He got the nomination because of extremists. And we got to counter these guys, man. We got to water this down. We cannot have these people choosing who the candidate will be. Now, you know, this is not really ultimately about whether you like Doug Mastriano, don't like Doug Mastriano, or somewhere in between. It doesn't matter, right? I mean, Doug Mastriano got the nomination to be governor because he got the support of the overwhelming majority of the people that form up the base of the Republican Party in Pennsylvania. Now, if you oppose the guy and you think his policies are wrong-headed and you think we're headed in the wrong direction as a Republican Party, well, then participate in the same democratic process that got him the nomination. Go out on the campaign trail, campaign against him or for anybody that you think is following his lead. Convince the majority of people to support you. And, you know, that's how the process is supposed to work, right? I mean, again, I'm belaboring the obvious, but it seems these days we have to spend a lot of time talking about what should be obvious. If you think Mastriano took the party in the wrong direction, then explain why. Campaign, argue that to the people, and get, you know, and get their support. But the establishment, for lack of a better way to describe it in Harrisburg, doesn't think like that, right? They don't, I mean, what I just talked about is a purely democratic process, and they don't want a democratic process because they don't have the support of the majority of people in the party. So they've decided instead they're going to rig the game. They're going to change the rules. They are going to bring in a whole bunch of people that they know completely fundamentally disagree, not just with Doug Mastriano, but with the people that supported Doug Mastriano and the people, if you will, from the Patriot movement, the America First movement, the MAGA movement, whatever you want to call it. They're going to import a whole bunch of these people who are not Republicans and don't share these attitudes, and therefore changing the mix of the voters. They're going to make it impossible for candidates of Mastriano's ilk, if you will, to succeed in the future. So once again, we have the base of the Republican Party saying one thing, believing one thing, acting in one direction, and we have the establishment, claims to be Republican, acting completely contrary. This is not a fantasy. This is not science fiction. This is not, it might happen. It could be, the legislation could be introduced anytime. So this is what I would suggest to everybody who's listening to this, who doesn't support this. Call your legislator, call your representative, call your senator, and ask them where the heck they are on this. Make them tell you where they are on this. Make them declare themselves, before we end up with another Act 77 piece of legislation that nobody supports, but somehow or another leadership pushed through. Make them show themselves and make clear to them, if that's how you feel, that you do not support this. Because if you don't, you're going to turn around and find, as I said before, the rules of the game have been changed. And once again, the establishment is making it impossible for the base of the party to get what it wants. We'll talk again soon.